Imagine this: one single battle on one single day decides the fate of an empire and who will rule the seas for the next 100 years. That's what was on the line. This is the story of Trafalgar.
All right, let's set the scene. It's 1805. Napoleon Bonaparte. I mean, this guy is on a roll. But there's one massive prize he hasn't claimed yet: Great Britain. To get there, though, he's got to cross the water. And guess who's waiting for him? The British Royal Navy. A showdown is coming, and it's going to be one for the history books.
So what's the big picture here? Well, it's pretty much a classic clash of the titans. You've got the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object.
On the ground, Napoleon's army was, frankly, untouchable. They were just steamrolling across Europe. But the sea? That was a whole different story. The British Royal Navy owned the oceans. They had France wrapped up in this brutal blockade, strangling their trade, keeping their warships pinned down in their own harbors. Napoleon's plan sounds pretty simple on paper. All he needed was to control the English Channel, just for a little while. If he could do that, his enormous invasion army just sitting there on the coast could finally cross. The key? He had to get his French and Spanish ships together, form one gigantic fleet, and just, well, punch the Royal Navy out of the way.
But you know, these huge historical events, they often boil down to just a handful of people. And this was all going to come down to a duel between two very different admirals.
Okay, so in the British corner, you've got a living legend, Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson. We're talking brilliant, super aggressive, and his men would follow him anywhere. And for the French and Spanish, Vice Admiral Pierre-Charles Villeneuve. A good commander, for sure, but he had the bad luck of going up against his old nemesis.
And when you put these two side by side, the difference is just wow. Nelson, he's a rock star, a proven winner. Villeneuve, meanwhile, is basically haunted by the fact that Nelson beat him once before at the Battle of the Nile. That's a huge mental advantage for the British right there. But the real difference maker? The crews. Think about it. Nelson's guys have been at sea for years, running that blockade. They're seasoned pros. Their gunnery is lightning fast and deadly accurate. The French and Spanish crews? They've been stuck in port, getting rusty. They just weren't ready for what was about to hit them.
Okay, so the stage is set. But before the big fight, you've got this incredible, massive game of cat and mouse that plays out across the entire Atlantic Ocean. So Napoleon's big idea was this. His fleets would sneak out, sail all the way to the Caribbean to meet up, and then come roaring back to Europe as this unstoppable force. And Villeneuve actually pulls it off. He slips past Nelson and heads for the West Indies. When Nelson finds out, the chase is on. I mean, we are talking about a grueling, months-long pursuit across thousands of miles of ocean. It pushed everyone and everything to the breaking point. Nerves were absolutely shredded. And right here, this is the moment everything changes. On his way back, after a minor skirmish, Villeneuve just loses his nerve. He gets spooked, thinks Nelson is right on his tail, and he completely ignores Napoleon's orders to head north and prep for the invasion. Instead, he bolts south for the safe harbor of Cadiz in Spain. And just like that, with that one decision, the entire invasion of Britain is off the table. Napoleon is so furious, he literally packs up his army and marches them off to fight in Germany. So, the invasion's a bust. Villeneuve is now stuck in Cadiz, and guess who's waiting for him outside? Yep, Nelson's fleet. A battle is going to happen, there's no way around it. And Nelson, well, he has this totally wild revolutionary plan up his sleeve, a strategy so bold, they'd call it the Nelson touch. Now, to really get how insane Nelson's plan was, you have to know how these battles usually went down. The rulebook said you used the line of battle. Basically, you get your ships in one long, neat line, the enemy gets in their long, neat line, and you sail past each other firing broadsides. It's very polite, very orderly, and honestly, a lot of times nothing really got decided. One side could just turn and leave if things went badly.
Here's the problem for Nelson. He's outnumbered. He's got 27 ships, they've got 33. If he plays by the rules and fights the traditional line battle, he's probably going to lose. So the real question is, how do you win when you're supposed to lose? You break the rules.
And that's where the Nelson touch comes in. It was genius. Instead of one long line, he's going to split his fleet into two columns. And then, get this, he's going to sail them straight at the enemy line, like two giant spears. The plan is to smash right through their formation, cut their fleet in half, and just completely shatter their organization. He wanted to turn that nice, orderly battle into an absolute chaotic mess, a ship-to-ship slugfest. Why? Because in that chaos, he knew his better trained, more experienced crews would dominate. It was a massive, massive gamble.
All right, October 21st, 1805, off Cape Trafalgar, Villeneuve finally leaves port. The moment is here. It's time. And as his two columns are bearing down on the enemy line, Nelson sends a message from his flagship, the HMS Victory. It's a signal that will go down in history. England expects that every man will do his duty. You can just imagine the effect that had on the entire fleet.
Everything happened just like Nelson planned. His lead ships took an absolute beating on the way in, but they didn't flinch. They held their course. And then, around noon, bam! They smashed through the enemy line. The orderly formation is gone. It's exactly the chaotic brawl Nelson wanted. The fight is well and truly on.
But then, in the middle of all this chaos, tragedy strikes. The Victory is locked in this brutal fight with a French ship. A sniper, high up in the rigging, takes a shot. And that bullet hits Nelson. It goes through his shoulder and into his spine. He's carried below decks, but he knows it's a fatal wound. But Nelson holds on. He lives just long enough to hear the news, to know that his wild, audacious plan had worked beyond anyone's wildest dreams. He delivered one of the most decisive victories the sea had ever seen.
I mean, just look at these numbers. They're hard to even wrap your head around. The British, they didn't lose a single ship. Not one. The French and Spanish, they lost 18 ships either captured or completely destroyed. And the casualties, almost 14,000 of their men compared to under 2,000 for the British. This wasn't a victory. This was an annihilation.
So what's the big takeaway here? Why do we still talk about Trafalgar? Well, for one, it cemented British naval dominance for the next 100 years. That period even has a name, the Pax Britannica. It also put a permanent end to Napoleon's dream of invading Britain. It was over. Nelson, of course, became this larger-than-life national hero. And in a final kind of crazy twist of fate, Admiral Villeneuve was captured, and he actually attended the funeral of his rival, Nelson, the man who beat him.
Think about that. In a single afternoon, Nelson didn't just save his country, he fundamentally shaped the next century of world history. Which really leaves you with one big question to chew on. Was the Battle of Trafalgar the single most decisive naval victory ever?